New York's biggest billionaire's daughter hid her identity and married a poor waiter. But when her mother-in-law slapped her in front of everyone on the wedding day and threw her out of the house, she made just one phone call that left the entire family on the street within the next 10 minutes. The woman who slapped me in my wedding dress had no idea the banquet hall, the mortgage on her house, and the company carrying her family name all belonged to one trust. Mine. My name was Sarah Miller, but that morning, everyone in that cheap banquet hall in Queens knew me as Sarah Brooks, the quiet orphan girl marrying Liam Gable, a waiter with tired eyes and a gentle smile. For 6 months I had hidden who I really was. No private drivers. No Fifth Avenue apartment. No Miller name. I worked at a small bookstore in Brooklyn, wore simple dresses and carried an old brown purse with a broken zipper. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to know one thing before I gave my heart to anyone. Would someone love me when they thought I had nothing? Liam did. At least I thought he did. He was kind when we met at a diner near Madison Avenue. He slipped extra coffee into my cup when I looked exhausted. He walked me home in the rain. He never asked about my family money because he didn't know it existed. But his mother, Mrs. Evelyn Gable, looked at me like I was a stain on expensive carpet. From the first dinner she hated me. "So Sarah," she said, tapping her manicured nails against a wineglass, "no parents, no real career, no savings. And yet somehow you found my son." Liam looked down at his plate. I waited for him to defend me. He didn't. That should have been my warning. On our wedding day, I stood in front of 80 guests in a rented hall with plastic flowers, gold curtains, and a cake leaning slightly to the left. I didn't care. I was happy because love, real love, was never supposed to need chandeliers. Then Mrs. Gable walked in wearing a silver dress brighter than mine. She smiled at the guests, then turned to me with poison in her eyes. "You look exactly like what you are," she whispered. "Cheap." I kept breathing. The ceremony had barely ended when she grabbed my old brown purse from the gift table. "What is this trash?" she snapped. "That's mine," I said calmly. She opened it and dumped everything onto the floor. Lip balm, a folded letter, a tiny velvet box, and a ring of old brass keys. The keys hit the tile with a sound that made my chest tighten. They belonged to my mother's first home in Manhattan. The only thing I carried everywhere. Mrs. Gable laughed. "Keys to what?" "A shelter." The room went silent. Liam stepped forward, but his mother raised one finger and he stopped. That was the moment something inside me quietly broke. I bent down to pick up the keys, but Mrs. Gable grabbed my wrist. "You will not embarrass this family any further." Then she slapped me. Hard. The sound cracked through the hall. My veil slipped. My cheek burned. Someone gasped. Someone else started recording. And Liam, my husband of 7 minutes, stood frozen beside his mother. Mrs. Gable pushed me toward the exit. "Get out," she shouted. "A beggar does not become a Gable just by wearing white." I stumbled through the doors into the rain. New York traffic roared beyond the curb. My dress dragged through dirty water. My cheeks still burned, but I did not cry. Because Mrs. Gable had mistaken silence for weakness. And Liam had mistaken my patience for permission. Standing outside that banquet hall, soaked in rain, I looked back through the glass doors and saw Liam watching me. He did not come out. "So let me ask you something. If the person you loved watched you get humiliated and stayed silent, would you forgive them? Or would that silence tell you everything? Comment what you would do." I reached into the hidden side pocket of my purse and pulled out the phone nobody knew I had. It wasn't fancy on the outside. That was the point. I dialed one number. A man answered before the first ring ended. "Yes, Miss Miller?" I looked at the banquet hall doors. "Initiate Project Wipeout." There was a pause. "Confirmed. Legal release only." "Everything legal," I said. "Everything documented." 10 minutes. Then I hung up. Inside the hall, Mrs. Gable was still performing. She was telling guests I had tried to trap her son. She was laughing, soaking in the power of being believed. Then her phone rang. She answered with a smile. The smile vanished. Across the room another phone rang. Then another. Her brother stood up. Her cousin whispered, "What do you mean the accounts are frozen?" Liam looked confused. Mrs. Gable shouted into her phone, "That is impossible. Gable Enterprises cannot be under review." But it was. For 3 years her family business had survived on loans secured through Miller Capital. She didn't know that because my father's company invested quietly through trusts and holding firms. She also didn't know our auditors had already found forged statements, unpaid tax liens and false collateral claims. I had known for weeks. I had waited. Not for revenge. For proof. At minute 4, the banquet hall manager walked in pale-faced and whispered to Mrs. Gable. The building lease had been terminated due to fraudulent payment documents. At minute 6, her bank called again. Business credit frozen. At minute 7, her attorney called. Emergency foreclosure proceedings had been triggered on the Gable family home because the loan had been backed by a falsified company valuation. At minute 9, every guest in that room had stopped eating cake. And at minute 10, 6 black SUVs rolled up to the curb. The doors opened. My father, Charles Miller, stepped out in a dark coat, followed by attorneys, security, and the head of our family office. The hall doors opened behind me. Mrs. Gable came rushing out, her silver dress shaking in the rain. Then she saw my father. Her face turned white. "Mr. Miller," she whispered. My father didn't look at her. He walked straight to me, took off his coat, placed it over my shoulders and said, "Sarah, are you hurt?" That was when Liam finally understood. "Sarah," he breathed. "Miller." Mrs. Gable's knees nearly gave out. "No," she whispered. "No, this can't be." I looked at her calmly. "You were right about one thing, Mrs. Gable. I did come from nothing once. My mother built our first life with those old keys you threw on the floor. My father turned that life into an empire. And I hid all of it because I wanted to know if your son loved me without it." Liam stepped toward me, rain running down his face. "I do love you," he said. "I was just scared of her." I looked at him for a long second. "That's the problem, Liam. You were more afraid of upsetting your mother than losing your wife." My attorney handed me a folder. Inside were the legal documents that could force the Gables out of their home by morning. Mrs. Gable fell to her knees. "Please," she sobbed. "Don't leave us with nothing." I stared at the woman who had called me a beggar 10 minutes earlier. "So here's my second question for you. If you had the power to take everything from someone who publicly destroyed you, would you use it? Or would you walk away knowing they would never forget your mercy?" I took the papers in my hand. Mrs. Gable covered her mouth. Liam whispered, "Sarah, please." Then I tore the foreclosure authorization in half. Everyone froze. Mrs. Gable looked up, stunned. I leaned down just enough for her to hear me. "I am not like you. I will not throw an old woman into the rain just because I can." She started crying harder. "But understand this," I continued. "You will remain in that house under a mercy agreement. Every payment will be monitored. Every lie will be audited. And every corner of that home will remind you that the woman you called a beggar chose compassion when you chose cruelty." Then I turned to Liam. "As for our marriage," I said, removing my ring, "it ended the moment you watched me fall and said nothing." I placed the ring in his hand. Not angrily. Final. My father opened the SUV door for me. Before I got in, I looked back once. Mrs. Gable was still kneeling in the rain. Liam stood beside her, holding a ring that no longer meant forever. And I realized something powerful. Sometimes the greatest revenge is not destroying people. It is letting them live with the memory of the moment they discovered who you really were. Moral: never judge someone by their clothes, their silence, or the story you invented about them. The quietest person in the room may be carrying the strongest name, the deepest pain, and the power to change your life with one phone call. If this story gave you chills, like the video, subscribe and tell me in the comments. Did Sarah do the right thing by walking away?